welcome to the hashtag Hear2Hear Keeping It 100 podcast. My name is Damon Nerler, and I'll be serving as the host. I'm the NAFCM media guru, and I'm joined by my co-host, DG Mon, the president of NAFCM. What's going on, DG?
Doing just great, Damon. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well, doing well. It seems like it's been forever since we've hung out, man, but it's great to see you as always, and I'm looking forward to an interesting time tonight. What about you?
Me too. I'm excited to learn more about this date mediation program and alternative responses to policing. It's couldn't be more timely.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, you are so right. You are so right. So, guys, we have an exciting guest with us tonight. It's Daniel Kornfield out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Daniel serves as the executive director of Dignity Best Practices and has a background in public safety, policing, and best practices research and consulting. And without further ado, we're going to bring in Dan to hang out with us tonight. Well, hello, Dan, and welcome to hashtag Hear2Hear Keep It 100 podcast. We've just given some biographical information on you. Is there anything else you would like to share aside from the formalities?
Hello, Damon. Hello, DG. Thanks for having me on. I guess I'll just add that I had the opportunity to be a reserve police officer in DC. And so I was working as a budget analyst for the mayor there in public safety. And DC has an unusual program where you can go through the police academy nights and weekends. And then you get a gun, a badge, arrest powers, and you go out and serve. And you have to do at least 24 hours a month to stay in good standing with the department. And so I did that for a year, and it's not the same as being a career officer. I wouldn't say I was a police officer with everything that was entails, but I did have that experience, and that gives me part of what I bring to the table in trying to work on alternatives to police response is understanding what police officers go through in their day-to-day world as well, and what the pros and cons of them responding to certain kinds of calls are. So just wanted to add that into the starting point.
Great. And that's a wonderful addition, knowing that you have that background, which is certainly relevant to what you're doing now. And that's the field mediation. And so we're going to get right into it. What does field mediation look like in action? What does that look like?
Yeah, so field mediation is a new concept. It's just been around for 3 or 4 years now, and it is essentially taking community mediators or people trained in community mediation and having them respond to 911 calls as unarmed responders. So a lot of people are more familiar with mobile crisis teams taking mental health calls that police officers used to go to. So you might have two, a mental health professional and a peer in a van showing up to a house where somebody's in crisis. Field mediation is two mediators in a van showing up to a dispute live. So it's an exciting opportunity to instead of taking an enforcement lens on a dispute, to say, can we take a improvement in human relationship kind of lens on that dispute? And oftentimes these are neighbor disputes, family disputes, noise complaints, pet complaints, unhoused person and business owner disputes. And these happen a lot. We actually estimate that about 10% of 911 calls are these kinds of calls. So there's a big opportunity out there to say, can we serve the community in a way that promotes empowerment and reconciliation instead of a sense of either I'm on the receiving end or the delivering end of an enforcement mechanism, which is probably not going to improve the relationship. I don't know how many times the police being called on a neighbor has improved the neighbor to neighbor relationship, but probably not too many.
So when you look at it, I guess, what are the skills of a community mediator better suited for responding to the calls than getting the police there for assistance or even a mental health specialist? So what do you guys bring to the table as far as skill set that is totally, or I would say kind of different from the police officer or the mental health specialist?
Yeah. So I would say in general, the way that I guess I should start out by saying my expertise is in alternative response and all sorts of alternative response models. I do not have decades of experience as a mediator, so I partner with people that have long-term experience as mediators and work with them to build these programs but I don't want to misrepresent myself and say that I am an expert in being a mediator because that's not actually my expertise. But I can say that when we built this program and when we're promoting it elsewhere, we do have to think a lot about the skill sets and the there are some kinds of 911 calls that absolutely need police officers. So just to be clear, they have an appropriate skill set for situations where there's, physical danger, there's a violent crime or a serious property crime that's been engaged in, and somebody needs to investigate and somebody needs to keep somebody safe, right? But mediators are usually not going to be interrogating people that they encounter in the field. Police officer might start out with a kind of who, what, where, why, when, where kind of situation, and you feel like you're kind of on the spot as the recipient of that. Whereas a mediator is going to say, "Tell me what happened," and then they're going to be a really good active listener, and a big part of what they're hoping to do is help that other person feel heard. And crisis responders also have this skill set of being really good active listeners. A thing that mediators have on top of that is being able to hold a warm, neutral space. So, like a typical crisis responder, if you're responding to somebody who, say, is having psychosis and they see bugs crawling on the wall and they're not there, you can be empathetic towards that and say, "You're having one of the hardest days, aren't you?" And that person can be like, "Yeah, I am," without risking somebody else feeling like you're not on their side anymore. But in a conflict, it's really important to figure out how to be warm neutral and be like, "Let me repeat back what I'm hearing from you," without saying, "Oh man, I can't believe you're going through that." Because as soon as the person across the street hears that and it's going to be their turn to talk, they're going to be like, "Oh, you're already on this person's side." Right? So one of the really important skill sets that field mediators bring into the field, and when we say field, we mean like an unstructured environment, like a street, a porch, somebody's house, not a mediation center that people have agreed to do a mediation at. But they're bringing some of those same skills that community mediators already have, which includes this ability to hold a productive, neutral kind of space that they're holding.
All right, so I guess we would say the empathy and an active listener and just that neutrality. Those are some things that you guys the skill sets that are needed to be able to handle those calls. Okay, good
Mhm.
deal. All right, DG, you had any questions you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I wanted to, if I may, ask more application type questions. Looking at a lot of our listeners may be listening, going, "Hey, is this something right for me? Is this something perhaps I should reach out and see about?" So I want to hone in on your work and support with the Date Mediation Center, because that's where I first learned about your work. Got to watch videos on it, get excited about it. What what would you recommend a center needs to have done or be prepared for before you're invited in to talk about, "Hey, let's see what we can help you with here"? What did you discover in your work with Dayton is really needed?
So y- this will not be a surprise probably to your main audience, but for me it was a revelation what community mediation centers do and are capable of. And I think it's really kind of a hidden gem in a lot of communities. And one of the things I hope is that other alternative response programs and police and fire departments will learn about community mediation as an asset in their community. Because they do have a list of referral partners, and often it's like a domestic violence hotline and a shelter and so forth. And if we can get community mediation centers on that list, I think that can get people a lot more connected to help. The mediation center had a relationship with the police department already, where they got the previous week's list of neighbor disputes, and they could call through that list and say, "Hey, we understood this 911 call. Would you like any further support from a mediation perspective?" And so that had already been going on for, I believe, several years, which meant that there was a relationship between the police department and the mediation center, which was productive. And so that's a good trust building starting point. I think a big part of doing alternative response work is trust building across agencies, and really doing good human services work in general, because no agency has all the solutions to a human-sized problem, right? The human-sized problems don't come in a puzzle piece that looks just like what an agency does. So it's really good that they already had that relationship built. And It's also a sizable mediation center, so they have a sizable full-time staff as well as volunteers. And so they had the kind of infrastructure capability to hire and train new people for this effort. Some community mediation centers are much smaller and might have only, two full-time staff instead of 5 or 10. And so when you're smaller, it's harder to launch a new program just because you're trying to keep your whole thing running with a skeleton crew. And then the Dayton Mediation Center, I guess they actually had been funded for a number of years by the city government to the point where the city took them over and made them an agency of the city. And one of the advantages that that brought them, besides funding stability, was it was easier for us to get them connected to the 911 system because for background checks and all of the kind of like security purposes for having access to the computer-aided dispatch system, it's easier to do that with a government employee than a non-governmental employee. It's not impossible with a community-based organization, but it just is a little bit of a longer road.
So when there are differences with other centers, I wish more communities like Dayton would realize the importance of mediation and really fully support it, as you discovered, and yet many don't. So if one
Mhm.
of them were interested, how does your training or rollout model take that into account? In particular, have you been working with the date mediation folks or other communication folks in developing what you're going to roll out? Because let's say I'm not part of the city and I don't have these additional resources, but I really want to do this. And so I want to go through this training. Who's helped develop the training to help me address those issues?
Yeah. So that's under development right now. We're actually looking for partners that would want to be training partners. Any city or county that wants to build a program like this, some of them already have a community mediation center there, and that's ideal, right? And in fact, your organization has one of the great lists of where are these organizations. And so if you have a community mediation center locally, then even if the idea is not to build the team staffed in that center, which is one way to do it, that's the way Dayton did it, but it could be that they say, you know what, we've already got a street based crisis response team, alternative response team. Let's cross train them to be able to do mediation as well as mental health calls. So if they say that, what we want to do is say, can your local community mediation center be mentors in that training process? And not just in the immediate training, the like, let's get you ready to go training, but ongoing, let's review scenarios together, what went well, what went poorly, maybe a quarterly get together, help train new staff. I think we're going to see that more in the next few years because local government funding has gotten really tight, right? ARPA funds are drying up. There's a lot of uncertainty around Medicaid and some other things happening nationally. And so it's a harder time for cities to say, let's build a whole new team and a whole new program. Easier for them to say, let's cross-train an existing team. So we kind of want that partnership with a local player that brings the conflict resolution piece to marry with our alternative response piece anywhere we're working.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a bit of a balancing process because you talked early on that a law enforcement officer is going to come with a specific frame and how they see a situation. So is going to be a mental health therapist come in a specific frame. A community mediator, whether they're trained in big M mediation, restorative circles, de-escalation, facilitation, it doesn't matter what the training is. What matters is that the lens we bring is the agency of decision making is always those in the conflict. It's not for me to assess them for what their illness may be. It's not for me to tell them what the law is and they need to change their behavior. It's for me to recognize that only they have the ability to really correct this conflict. And so how can I sit with them in a way that helps them, those in conflict, seize that ability and do something? So it, it I'd be excited when you have it ready to roll and see where you are. And I think what's going to be key is making sure who's working with you, as you said early on, you don't have a lot of the community mediation skill set, that there's really recognized leaders working with you on that. And
Hmm.
so like, if I went in to do a medical procedure, I don't have an MD after my name. No doctor's going to believe me when I say, you really want to do this, because
Yeah.
I don't bring that credibility. So I'm fascinated to see how you balance this out and where we go further. I'm going to turn this back to Damon. Thank you for answering the questions.
My next question is, what will be different in communities who adopt this model? What will be the impact? What would happen if they were able to adopt this model that you guys are
Yeah.
utilizing?
So big picture, one of the parts of my thinking is that in the social contract that's kind of invisible, right? We hope that when anybody calls the people they pay taxes to for help, that they are not afraid of those people, that they will get genuine help, right? And unfortunately, we all know that that depends in our country. Some people feel that way and some people don't, and for very good reasons, right? And unfortunately, what we want to build is a world in which that help is available for everyone. And I think field mediation is a piece of that. And because it's not enforcement based, it's not going to get anybody in trouble. It's not going to be weaponized. So it's not like somebody's calling 911 to go get that person. It's if mediation's showing up, it's like, how do we make this better together and how do we make it sustainably better? And I think there's a lot of appetite in communities for that kind of response. And we see the field mediators ask questions like, "Have you had a conversation with your neighbor in the last 6 months where you were not yelling at each other?" And if the answer to that is no, let's try that next. Let's come when we're not heated and then have the conversation. So oftentimes it's not even a mediation in the moment because people are up here, but it's conflict coaching separately with the parties, helping them move to a place of feeling like this is happening to me and I have no choices. To DG said it really well in terms of empowering them to see their options, talk about their options, and think through that. And then we can have a more productive conversation a couple days later, sometimes on the very same porch where they were yelling at each other. So I think it's a really exciting and promising program, and I think a lot of communities would welcome it.
Yes, I find it to be a very interesting, approach and model, trying to establish peace. That's one of the greatest things ever, and not being aggressive, but having all parties being heard and feeling as though they're able to get the access and justice that they need. But yes, that sounds great. But Dan, as always, man, these shows go so fast, and we
Yes.
appreciate you for being on, being transparent and sharing your experience and insight with us. Is there any one thing you want to leave with the audience before you go?
You know, I think that there's a phrase that I heard first from a police officer in San Antonio, and I think it applies to all of this space, and it's connection over correction. And I think that's what we think helps people is building a genuine human connection. And so I guess I'll leave with that.
Love it, love it, love it. All right. DG, did you have anything?
No, just thank you very much for planting these seeds.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Dan. As we always say it here, is for keeping it 100 and just being
Hey,
yourself and delivering. So we appreciate you. And thanks again for coming on and being our guest. Wonderful job.
thanks for having me. Look forward to seeing you again.